Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started since we do have another webinar with NAFA after this. So I just want to welcome everyone to the Pharmacy Initiative Leaders Showcase U. And this is the Showcase U or Showcase University series. So I'll be your host for tonight. My name is Dr. Maiah Hardin. I am a PGY1 pharmacy practice resident at the Michael DeBakey VA Medical Center. I'm also a 2020-2021 graduate of the PILS Protege program or the coach program. And I will, as I mentioned, be your host for tonight's event. So the purpose of the Showcase U webinar is to really it's kind of like a series of classes that is meant to guide our future residents or our future residency program applicants on showcasing your best self. And we have this really divided into two classes. The first class is based on showcases and career fairs. And then the second class will be at a later date and focused on interviews and follow-up. So be sure to follow the Pharmacy Initiative Leaders at PILS Connect for more helpful gems. Also be sure to tune into the NAFA Career Panel. That'll be starting at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. We have a great deal of our own PILS family that will be contributing to this really amazing panel. And so I would encourage a lot of you to go ahead and join that webinar after this. And so with that said, we'll go ahead and get the program started. So this presentation is just going to be pretty brief. It's called It's Showtime. We're just going to mention that we are just a few little points on how to sell yourself and how to be your best self and let your best quality shine in preparation of residency showcases, whether that's mid-year, regional meetings, regional showcases, or local showcases as well. And so we kind of have this split into two parts, like rehearsal, kind of the preparation mode for these showcases, and showtime, when it's actually time to present your skills and show your best self to the showcase or to different programs that you may encounter. So this is our first part. So virtual showcases really are just like a whole new ballgame. I know a lot of us are used to maybe used to in-person showcases and networking in that aspect, but virtual showcases really kind of bring out a different skill set and a different side for program applicants for the new year. And so it's really important that we mention expectations, preparation, and then finally like how to really bring it home and to show your best self. And so I just kind of want to briefly touch on like expectations concerning virtual showcases. And really the point that I want to bring home is that you really need to expect the unexpected. Virtual showcases, whether this is mid-year, regional meetings, regional showcases, some program specific programs may have their own specific showcases, or there's different organizations that have showcases like VA residencies or IHS as well. And so it's important that we prepare for really any type of platform, whether this is Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams. I really recommend downloading each of these platforms and kind of getting yourself familiar with these, kind of doing a test run if you have like family or friends that you can kind of test these platforms out with to make sure your technology is working at its best, and also testing out your internet connection beforehand. So specifically for virtual mid-year, last year, whenever I attended, there was the Entrado platform that was used. And this really, each program had a booth, quote unquote, that participants would enter into, and they would either utilize the chat function or video session to communicate with programs that way. And so this was a really unique thing about mid-year that I actually have an example of on the next slide, just so we can kind of know what to expect as we anticipate these things. And then another thing, as we are entering into this virtual world and we're kind of navigating virtual networking, it's really important to be courteous of others that may be in chats or in breakout rooms. As I know, it can be everybody can be nervous and different things, but it's important to be courteous, make sure we're not talking over each other, or making sure that we're kind of limiting our questions based on the pool of applicants and different people that may want to ask different questions. And so this can really be a reflection of how you may present yourself as a resident. And so it's important to really have that initial first impression as being polite and being very courteous, even in a virtual environment. And so this is actually an example of like a booth, of a little screenshot of a program that I chatted with it mid-year last year. And so it's just like a quick little overview of how the booths are set up. You see their different chat sessions, different Zoom links and things that may be available to program applicants or people that are seeking out opportunities to communicate and network. And so a really strong saying that I live by, whether that's through pharmacy school, through residency as well, is that proper preparation prevents poor performance. And so it's really important that we prepare ourselves for these different residency showcases and different arenas that we may place ourselves in as we are searching through our different programs and in different program lists as well. So I would highly recommend before attending any showcase that you draft a list of programs that you're interested in and programs that are really tailored to what your postgraduate interests are. And another important point that kind of goes along with this is that we want to do our research before the residency showcase. So we can create a thoughtful list of questions specifically tailored to certain programs, or you may want to tailor your questions based on who is present at the meeting, whether that's the program director, program coordinator, residents as well. And so it really makes a good first impression to prepare ahead of time and not ask questions that may be found like online on a program's website, just so you make sure that you are prepared as possible and really make that strong first impression in showing that you've done your research about the program and it really communicates your genuine interest in potentially pursuing a residency in that program. And so I did mention like drafting a list of programs and different qualities that you may want to look for. And so what does this typically look like? So this is a little example of some research I did about my own program. And I also made this list for every program that I was applying to or programs that I was interested for showcases. So this is just an example of things that I looked for in programs and things that I kind of highlighted what my interests were. I would highlight in yellow, just so I had as much information collected about the program beforehand. So I would kind of tailor my questions and tailor my questions based on what I admired in the program. And so I have another example on the next page, specifically catered to the institution, different rotations, electives, how many beds the hospital has. And so I would make sure that I had as much information collected beforehand. And so I can kind of tailor my questions once the showcase or once mid-year arrived. So moving forward with preparation, specifically for mid-year, I have a few pearls included in here. You want to make sure that you review the online showcase schedule ahead of time. It is important, that as we are in different time zones and different mid-year may have different CE sessions or different educational sessions alongside the residency showcases. So we want to make sure that we review online showcases, the schedule ahead of time to make sure that we have our schedule in advance and that we're not late and that we're prompt for things. Also for mid-year, if you're participating in personal placement service or PPS, it's important to register. Now would be a good time to consider that, but that is a different platform that we have to register through, which is ASHP Career Farm. So we want to make sure those preparations are in place. If you're presenting a poster or participating in a clinical skills competition, it's also important that we prepare ourselves in those ways and make sure we do our research as well as any clinical preparation that we may need beforehand. So now it's showtime, and we want to see how we really show our best selves and present ourselves to put our best foot forward at the showcase. And so when it comes to selling yourselves, there are a few things that you just want to keep in mind. First would be make sure that you are in business attire, and I would want to point out, make sure we're in full outfit business attire, as it can be tempting to want to dress from the top up, since this is the only view that the camera may have. But I would highly, highly, highly encourage everyone to dress in full outfit, because also looking good, feeling good, and performing good all go hand in hand together. So I would highly, highly encourage full outfit business attire, making sure that you're looking your best. Also, there's Some talks about business cards versus CV, which one is needed, which one's preferred. But for virtual showcases, business cards can potentially be an item that you may want to utilize, whether that's a virtual business card, but it's not required, once you're networking with programs and different people within the program. CVs are not necessarily needed in the virtual showcase, just because there can be many different applicants and participants in virtual meetings, and it may be hard for program directors or coordinators to kind of sift through CVs. Another important thing is eye contact. We want to make sure that we are looking directly into the camera instead of like off to the side or off to where the program coordinator, director, residents, where their face may be. You want to make sure you're looking in the camera. Also, make sure that you are coming to these meetings and showcases with genuine intentions. It's definitely evident through showcases and through different arenas that we make sure that we're researching programs ahead of time and make sure that we're really looking at programs that are based on our interests in places that we can see ourselves, for the next year, potentially too. So it's important that you speak with each program, make sure that your interactions are genuine based on what you truly desire for your postgraduate interests. Another important thing for virtual showcases is lighting and optimal backgrounds. And so this is important to make sure that you have proper lighting. If you have a background, you wouldn't want like a bed in the background or something potentially inappropriate behind you. You want like a simple, like a plain background or just like a pleasant room behind you, just so this can also convey professionalism. And then finally, when you're speaking with programs, it can be, pretty scary to talk to if you have like 10 to 12 programs to speak to at a time. It can be a little scary, and that's understanding, but make sure you pace yourself and, talk to programs that you can have genuine interactions with. Okay, and then lastly, we want to just make sure you enjoy the full meeting experience. You want to attend educational poster sessions for mid-year, network like never before. And then as you're navigating these different settings, you want to breathe, be confident and take a breath because you are definitely meant to be where you're at right now. And these showcases are just another outlet for you to network and to show your best self. And then after the meeting is over and after showcases have concluded, we want to follow up and reflect. Thank you cards, virtual thank you cards have been something kind of on the rise lately, as well as emails if you have any meaningful interactions or if you have a PPS interview. This is something that's pretty crucial in making sure you're following up with your networking and really establishing that connection with whoever you speak with. And then you want to finalize any lists or anything you found out about programs with pros and cons, discuss that with your mentors, discuss that with your coaches, if you're a protege or if you have any other mentors to discuss with as well. And then just to kind of wrap up, just to make sure that you secure your spot, first, always for expectations, just expect the unexpected, prepare for any kind of virtual platform, virtual setting. Make sure you're researching your programs ahead of time, creating thoughtful questions based on your specific interest in the program and your specific desires for your future. And then lastly, you want to attend each showcase with genuine intentions and genuine interactions that you can find the program to best fit you and to best fit your career. And so now we'll move forward with the panel, and we have like a Q&A panel that we'll have. And so I'll go ahead and let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves in the order of the flyer. So we'll start with Dr. Uzo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abajue. I'm a PILS protege from the class of 2021, and I'm a current PGY1 at MUSC in the traditional program.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mitchell Blewett. Also a PILS graduate of the class of 2021. I am currently a PGY1 Health System Pharmacy Administration and Leadership resident at Cleveland Clinic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Geannette Green, or Dr. Gigi. I am a PILS graduate of 2018 to 2019. Immediately following graduation, I completed a PGY1 managed care residency with WellCare Health Plans, which is now Involved Pharmacy Solutions. And immediately following residency, I started my current position as manager of clinical pharmacy services on our pharmacy quality improvement team, where I basically build clinical programs and oversee them throughout the year.
Hi, this is Lieutenant Jusino-Acosta. I was a PILS protege back in for the 2019-2020 year. Immediately following that, I did my PGY1 residency at an ambulatory care focused Indian Health Service residency out at Albuquerque, New Mexico. And after that, I now, hello? Can you hear me? Am I louder yet?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. And so after doing my PGY1 residency at Albuquerque, New Mexico, I am now a pharmacist with our immigration healthcare services.
Welcome, everyone. My name is KaShena Kennedy. I graduated from the PILS program in 2020. I am the current PGY1 Pediatric Pharmacy resident at Mayo's Children's Hospital in Rochester, Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Manangai. I'm a PILS graduate from the 2019 to 2020 group. And my first year residency was at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, cool. Nationwide Children's Hospital. So I did a PGY1 ambulatory care community-based, so pediatric ambulatory care. And now I'm in Houston, Texas. So I moved across the country and I'm at Texas Children's Hospital. And I'm their Global Health Pharmacy Fellow with Texas Children's Global Hope.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. We're looking forward to a great discussion. So we'll go ahead and start with our first question. And I will go ahead and direct this one to Dr. Kennedy. And the question reads, even though applications open in November, would you recommend waiting until after mid-year when you have a chance to connect with the programs to submit your applications? The person mentioned they're trying to be proactive, trying to connect with programs now, but just wanted the panel's thoughts on the approach.
I would recommend waiting till after mid-year or after any opportunity that you meet with a program. I know when I did the virtual showcase last year, many of the programs had virtual open house events prior to mid-year where you can meet the program, meet the resident, meet the RPD staff, get a tour of the hospital prior to mid-year, and you have more of an intimate one-on-one time with the program. So after that, I will feel comfortable with submitting early, but anything before then or before actually meeting with the staff at the particular residency program, I wouldn't suggest submitting an application to, because you might meet them and it may not be a good fit for you.
Agreed. And if any of the other panelists have any input on that, feel free to chime in as well.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. I agree with KaShena's take on that. There were definitely programs that I had on my list that I thought I would like to apply to. And then after entering their room and kind of seeing their overall vibe, I decided it wasn't for me. So if I would have already applied, I would have wasted money. And then this whole process it can be pricey. So keep that in mind.
Agreed.
Yes, personally for me, I was interested in federal
positions. So I focused more on VA and Indian Health Services, and so they were not doing PPS. However, my coaches thought that PPS would be a great experience because of the interview practice, and it definitely was. There was um, some booths that reached out to me, and so I went ahead and I interviewed with them, and some of the questions start to repeat themselves, and you start to get more comfortable answering them and seeing how people feel or how their body language is before or after you say something. And then also, surprisingly, some places that I really didn't even think to interview with, after doing a PPS with them, after they reached out to me, I ended up getting an interview with them because I was really interested in their program.
And yeah, so I agree with everything that has been said. The only thing I would add is that I really saw mid-year in those showcases as an opportunity to kind of come up with material that I wanted to talk about in the interview. So you might have a really positive interaction with the RPD, for example, that, next thing you know, that's a good portion of your letter intent that's really going to make you stand out. So I would think that, I love that, being proactive, that's great, but take mid-year, take these showcases as an opportunity to both learn more about the program and potentially have material that you can talk about in your application, as well as further identify that this is somewhere you want to apply to. And know that, there's no negative impact of not applying earlier. Obviously, you don't want to be applying like the day of the deadline if they were to look, but, if mid-year's in the second week of December, applying mid-December is perfectly fine.
Right, thank you guys so much for that. Okay, moving forward to our next question. And I'll direct this one to Dr. Green. So do you suggest sending thank you or follow-up emails after interactions, like non-PPS interactions during mid-year or specifically during the residency showcase? So I'm guessing that this is kind of alluding to when the time period is for sending follow-ups and thank you emails.
Yeah, so for those of you that do PPS, I think a lot of people actually submit their thank you notes and they have like thank you drop boxes right there. So a lot of people will step away, write their thank you note, like reflect on whatever type of conversation that they had with that RPD and drop them right away, which now it's going to be different because it's virtual and they aren't going to be those drop boxes. So I imagine you could send them an email. I don't know if there's an option to do it virtually or not, but if there is, you could do that by the end of the showcase as well. For those that go to the booths, typically when I was a resident or P4, I sent all of my thank you notes immediately following the residency showcase, 1 or 2 days after. So you could potentially do them that evening or the next day, but just be thoughtful about it. Think about the questions that you asked, the conversations that you had with each different program, and make sure you're directing or your comments are specific to that program and the people that you actually spoke with at that booth. You don't want to make that mistake of crossing things up.
I think something that I would add to that may not necessarily the showcase, but I think you can also follow up with people who you don't talk to at the showcase, but you want to be careful that the interaction is significant. Like if you see someone in line somewhere necessarily, you're not going to send them a follow-up email like, oh, like I saw you somewhere. But if it's significant enough, you have like a thought-provoking conversation, then I think that would be okay to follow up with them. And also, I agree with Gigi in the sense that you don't want to send it right after, but maybe a few days after, even potentially at most a week after, because they're likely going to be getting hundreds of emails from hundreds of people that they spoke with. So if you want to keep them or keep yourself at the forefront of their mind, you might want to wait a few days. So I think that was really good.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the follow-up period for specifically mid-year. I know it can be kind of crazy with different sessions and all of the different residency showcases going on. So I would say 5 to 7 days at the latest. So next question. is what strategies help you to determine the best fit program for you? And I'll go ahead and direct this one to Dr. Blewett.
Yeah, so this is a tough one because I feel like so often we're pressured to going into programs like thinking that we know that we want to go there. I myself was like, I'm like, oh, these are the programs I want to go to, and my Pills protege was like, okay, slow down. Like, why are you picking these institutions? Like, let's start going through them. And I think you really need to, the big things is being open-minded and then being honest with yourself. So it's easy to think that, you know, you want it to fit so bad, but you need to really like reflect, understand what's important for you and see where you think you're the best fit. So this comes in understanding the program itself, looking at the nature of it, and think about what is important to you. So is geography important to you? Is the size of the institution important to you? Are you interested in pediatrics, for example, and you want a program that has a PGY2 in pediatrics? So being kind of honest with yourself in what's important to you, and then finding an institution that you think reflects that, but then also connecting with those individuals. So finding as many individuals as you can to kind of see what that culture is, see how they interact with each other, see how they present themselves, and then trying to be authentic in how you're coming across. So being true to yourself and letting them see who you are and how they respond will kind of give you an idea of what that would be like if you were at that institution. So I think it's something that can always be tough, because sometimes I feel like we have our mind made up, but just trying to find the best fit, and then kind of reflecting with, how did that interaction make you feel when you left that booth? Were you looking up apartments in that city? Were you researching the program even more? Did you just feel like very positive about that? So I think that would be my advice, and know that fit over anything is going to be the biggest factor in contributing to how successful you are, and also how happy you are in whatever program you match at.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dr. Blewett. Something else that I did, and it helped me with the residency showcase as well as writing my LOI. And it sounds kind of crazy or stupid, but I literally took a blank piece of paper and I wrote on like one side, what are the things that are kind of unique to me, like my experiences, whether that be rotation, past work history, whatever. What did I want out of a program, like specifically characteristic traits. And that allowed me, when I spoke to the residency programs, it allowed me to match what I wanted and how I describe myself and define myself to the program, because sometimes I'm that person that needs to see pros and cons on paper. But then also when I went back to writing my LOIs, because you're going to tailor your letter of intent specifically to the programs that you're applying to, it allowed me to really have a match and speak to, okay, how do I match with this program and what can I contribute to this program, versus just trying to fit myself into this bucket because I say this is what I want before I really want this, without, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely, that makes sense. Thank you all. That was amazing, just hearing different intakes about how to find your best fit for programs. So another question that we have are, we talked about intentional questions, being genuine, and having engaging questions. So what are some questions that you've all heard, questions that you may have asked programs at showcases that have really made you stand out, or potentially questions that you found really interesting in like a showcase setting? And so I'll direct this question to Dr. Uzo.
Yeah, in a showcase setting, I think first of all, what I did going into the showcase is I had a list with me, and I did this for interviews as well. So I had a general list of questions I could ask to any program. And if there was a program that I was specifically interested in, I had those questions for the program as well. As far as the virtual showcase, wasn't really a situation where they were asking questions. It more so, it depended on the program. So some programs had presentations, and some programs, as soon as you enter in a breakout room, it's just you and a resident, and they're like, what questions do you have for me? So I think it's really important to come prepared for any scenario. I think for me, things that were really big for me coming in was seeing the relationship between residents and their RPD. And I was really just trying to sniff out what's really going on, because from a virtual standpoint, it can seem kind of difficult to kind of really get a good take on how the residents interact, how everyone is interacting with each other. And then of course for us, we had virtual interviews, so it kind of carried on into virtual interviews. So I tried to ask thoughtful questions about, what do you like most about the program? If there was something that you could change about the program, what would it be? And surprisingly enough, everyone was very open and honest about what they wanted to change. And some of those answers helped me eliminate some programs or kind of pushed it lower on the list of programs of interest for me. So I think personally for me, it was looking into, what's your favorite rotation? That's a required rotation. What's your, things like that revolve around like rotations or interactions. How do providers take pharmacy? How do they respond to pharmacy? Are they open to pharmacy's recommendations and interventions? So those are a few of the questions that I asked to, I would say, most of the programs. And I also made sure if I went into a room, I at least asked a question. I think it's a little awkward to go into a room and just kind of sit there and everyone else is interacting and then you just leave, or just come in the chat and say, oh, thank you for answering questions, and then you leave. I think it's important to try to speak to someone because, like Mitchell was saying, I tailored every letter of intent to include who I spoke with at mid-year. So after speaking with Dr. such and such, but if you didn't speak to anyone, you can't really say that. So I think it's important to try to make some effort to have interactions with either residents or the RPD at mid-year.
I will say I liked what you said, Dr. Uzo. So from the opposite perspective of being at the booth, I will say the people that I remember the most are those ones that ask me questions about my experience at the residency. Like when you say anything that's asking what's my perspective, that's when I have to like take a step back and really think about it and have a thoughtful answer for you. So those are the people that typically stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. Kind of from seeing both perspectives, kind of now as a resident and then as a student, completely agree with Dr. Uzo and Dr. Lee as well. So we have another question. There are some programs that the person's interested in that will not be at mid-year, but will have their own informational sessions. Some of the sessions have a really large amount of people attending, so questions are only asked through chat, and you don't really get that face-to-face interaction. Would it be appropriate to email separate questions later so they could at least recognize your name through email and kind of develop that connection that way? So Dr. Manangai, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say that it's not only appropriate, but I think it's something you should absolutely do. Like have some sort of follow up, especially if, like you said, you don't get that one-on-one conversation with people. Um, Really, FaceTime or virtual time, however you want to call it, in this virtual space is really important because you want people to remember you before you actually meet them in person or have that one-on-one interaction. So the more your name comes up, the better. And I would actually tweak that. The more your name comes up in a positive light, the better. So not necessarily a negative light. Um, when I was applying as a PGY1 or a P4 student as a PGY1, it was more so it was in person for me. So my experience was a little bit different. But when I was applying to fellowship and PGY2s, I did go through this virtual application cycle, but I didn't really go to these sessions kind of like this. So I can't speak too much on that. And I feel like the current PGY1s can speak more to that. But if you do go to a session, even like this, if you have follow-up questions, take that next step, talk to that person, ask them, like Gigi said, about their experience, because the more you talk to someone, the more frequently before you actually submit your application, I always think that's for the better.
But also just to add, when you email the programs, give them a little bit of grace. Don't expect them to be able to answer all of your questions immediately. Give them some grace, give them a couple of days. They will answer you. They are not purposefully ignoring you.
Dr. Kennedy, do you have anything to add?
I think now that I'm on the other side, I will definitely piggyback off that. It is different on the other side when you are receiving emails and so many questions, great questions from candidates or potential interviewees. And so I think giving that resident or whoever you email that grace to kind of answer your question appropriately and thoroughly, just to build that connection, I think it's definitely important.
Yes, I definitely agree. So we do have another question. Someone asked specifically for myself, how has the transition been from pharmacy student to PGY1 resident? So I always like being asked this question because there's just so many different facets to it and so many different things that you can kind of elaborate on. So transition from pharmacy student to resident, it's definitely an adjustment as the bar is raised very, very high for resident, but you do have to take into perspective that you are developing into a clinical practitioner and that you have patients that you are responsible for, which you are responsible as a student, but the stakes are definitely higher as a resident and as someone who is eventually going to become a clinical pharmacy specialist. And so you kind of have to keep that in mind, but also the transition has been a lot more bearable because of the preceptors that I've had in my program. I think that's one of the things that kind of drew me to my program was like the preceptors and the amount of support that they give you in that transition. And so because I've had preceptors that have, understood where I am and that I'm still growing, I'm still learning, this has definitely helped with the transition. And I will say with that student to resident transition, please don't be afraid to say, I'm not sure. If you're asked a question, or I'll look it up. Make sure to always follow up, always look it up, and don't guess. So just giving yourself grace, kind of supporting, having that support around you, and really kind of that might be something that you need to look at for like programs that you may be interested in to see how those interactions were, as I think one of the panelists mentioned earlier. So that's a good question. Okay. So our next question is, how do you suggest that applicants approach the dilemma of wanting to apply to a lot of programs, but also want to avoid applying to too many programs, quote unquote, and becoming susceptible to things like financial and interview burnout, especially alongside academic/rotation obligations and financial responsibilities? So I'll kind of open the floor to see, I know we have a lot of different perspectives I can kind of take on this question, kind of open the floor to see who wants to take a shot first.
I'll speak on this. That was a big question I had going into, and Chandler was my coach, and I was trying to figure out how many programs should I apply to, because sometimes you hear people say, oh, you'll only get half of the interviews that from the programs you apply to, but I mean, that's not necessarily the case. So it's, you feel like there's no way to necessarily gauge it. I will say, apply to as many as you feel comfortable with, but just know that there's a possibility that you may get all those interviews, and then know that there's a finite time that you have and you're dealing with rotations and maybe assignments that you have, and you need to find a way to schedule all your interviews. And I'm not sure if this year, if most programs are virtual or in person. So I think I was very fortunate this past year that everything was virtual. So I just had to take off that day for rotation and stayed at home and did my interviews. But honestly speaking, I cannot imagine doing all of those interviews in different places. If you decide to apply broadly throughout the whole nation, that I can only imagine how tricky that can be at that point, because about 5 interviews in, I was tired. So I would say keep that in mind. I didn't know how many interviews I would get. So I can say I applied to about 13 programs and I had 11, 12 interviews. So by the time I started getting more interviews, it just became a little bit overwhelming. So I would say keep that in mind, but also at the same time, don't let that discourage you from applying to programs as well. I feel like that doesn't answer it, but at the same time, I tried to apply to a good enough amount that I felt like I had a good chance of getting some interviews, but don't get too crazy and start going into the like 20s and that many programs. I would say you might be upset at yourself after.
So just to add, something that I did was I asked my preceptors and my professors at my university that knew me the most and knew me the best, and they knew what I looked like on paper. They had seen how I performed on rotations as well in class. And I asked them for their honest feedback. And these are the ones that are going to give you true, honest feedback. But I asked them, if I applied to a residency program, your residency program, what did they feel like the likelihood that I would get interviews was? And based off of that feedback, that helped me to tailor how many programs I applied to. So I didn't want to apply to a lot of programs, but I didn't want to apply to too few programs if my preceptor said like, oh, well, you have some things you need to work on and like you're a good candidate, but X, Y, and Z. So use like the relationships that you've built so far with your preceptors to allow yourself to really have that true feedback. And sometimes that could potentially help you kind of pivot as necessary.
Dr. Ali, did you have something to add to that as well? I think your sound may have cut out. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm using the phone, so I have to unmute on the computer and on the phone, and it gets complicated.
That's completely fine.
Yes, anyways, I did my P4 rotations in 2019, so that was when we were still doing in-person interviews. I don't really know how it's going to be this year, because I know last year everything was predominantly, even the interviews were predominantly video. However, during that P4 year, I really treated it as I was investing in myself. I allotted a budget, and I was like, this is the money that I'm going to save for applications and for interviews, because at the end of the day, I'm investing in myself. I was also very proactive in talking to my preceptor that I knew that I was going to have for that interview month, which was the amazing Dr. Lipscomb, so thank you. And she was in full support of me going to any interviews that I possibly would have had. And so that was kind of my take on it. I ended up applying to 16 places, and I got 13 interviews. So it definitely, like, everywhere's different, everyone's different. Not saying that you need to go that high, but definitely if you believe in yourself and you believe that those places are places you do want to go to, and it's not because you're in this desperation of, oh, I want to get some sort of residency, then go for it, invest in yourself.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Ali. I love that, investing in yourself, keeping that perspective in mind as you move forward with your career and following your dreams. Okay, so now we're going to go into our breakout rooms. It's going to kind of give our meeting participants a little opportunity to ask like one-on-one questions, any specific questions about programs or just about the application process in general that may not have hadn't asked in our general session. And so we'll have about 10-15 minutes to kind of network and talk about and kind of ask our questions and being intentional. So we will go ahead and open the breakout rooms up. And so we should be getting our notifications soon.